Assalamu alaikum dear students, welcome back to the logistics management lecture number 2. You already know me, Dr. Khurram Shehzad Mughal. I don't need to introduce myself again and go through that whole introduction thing again. I have already tried to establish the importance of logistics management and supply chain management and this subject area as a whole, that how important it is for any business entity. In fact, to talk about supply chain is to talk about the whole business process. This is what Peter Drucker said in 1969, and it is somehow very important aspect with world becoming a global village, with globalization, with so much trade going on. The importance of this subject in the success of any business entity has become very imperative. During the last lecture, I highlighted the book that we are going to cover during this course, the book that we are going to follow during this course, and then I also highlighted the contents of this course, that this is the broader area that we are covering. We would talk about the intro, we would talk about, we are already going through the introduction of this course, we would talk about the product, that the supply chain process is very much focused on the product, and to ensure that timely delivery of that product to the customer on the time that he needs, at the place that he needs, and basically at the price that he is willing to pay is the whole aim of any business entity. And that in that aim, in order to achieve that aim, logistics management and supply chain management plays a very, very pivotal role. Now, we also discussed that we would also encompass the product handling, the product distribution, the inventory management. We would also focus on, you can say, the network process, the network planning process. In fact, we would also discuss the supply scheduling, the supply decisions, the storage decisions, the storage process. This is what we would go through in this course. Now, in the last lecture, I also gave you the historical perspective of logistics management. I specifically highlighted that it is almost, or in fact, as old as the trade itself. With growing trade, the importance of logistics management has been emphasized more and more and more, and that is how it became a separate area of study, of specialization. People are doing research on it. People are supply chain management professionals who are focused on this aspect of the business, because it is one of the very important pillars of any business entity. Now, we also discussed that in the absence of transportation and storage facilities, people were only limited to a certain amount of goods and services that they could consume, because the cost of transportation or means of cost of transportations were high. Either the cost of transportations were high, or the transportation facilities were not that technologically advanced in the historical perspective. And then same goes for the storage facility. Either they were very expensive to store certain products, or it was, you can say, not technologically that advanced that it could handle certain type of products. With the development in those facilities and technologies, the quantity or the types and the variety of goods and services that we can consume today has increased, and it is ever increasing. Going back to the historical perspective, there are still, even in Pakistan, even in Africa, you would see certain sort of, you can say, self-subsistence villages sort of thing, where people would be located near the production area themselves. They may be producing whatever they want to consume by themselves. There is very lesser access to outside environment because the transportation access is expensive or not available over there. Secondly, they cannot consume wide variety of products, that being the case because of, again, the same technological development that have not taken place in those areas. So this would mean that such type of areas still exist in various parts of this globe. You can look at far-flung areas of Africa or Australia or for example, even in, you can say, even inside Pakistan. Areas which are difficult to access. With that difficulty, the cost of access goes up. With the cost of access, when the cost of access goes up and the opportunities to earn revenue is very less for those individuals, if certain products are provided to them with that higher cost, they would not be able to afford it. So the logistics, it is the issue, the debate under the supply chain process or the logistics management process, that is the cause of those products not being able to reach those individuals in those subsistence economies. They might not be able to, for example, earn enough revenue or enough incomes to afford those products at which the supply chain process or logistics process would provide those products to those individuals. So again, it is an important aspect. Then we discussed also that as in the perspective of comparative advantage, with declining costs of transportation and declining cost of storage and improvement in their technologies, areas and economies and countries can specialize in certain products, and with that specialization they can produce in excess, they can produce those products at cheaper rate, cheaper cost, at lower opportunity cost, and they can export the rest to other countries in exchange for other goods and services. And that is basically the premise, the basic foundation of theory of comparative advantage. Why countries would specialize? Because they can arrange to provide other goods and services for exchange of their own commodities. They export and then they import. And that is why every country does not have to produce each and everything. And that is only possible with the advancement in technologies in logistics and the reduction in the cost of logistics. Logistics would include the transportation, the storage, and all those aspects that we have been discussing. We also looked at a graphical image in which I showed you that it is not just this whole network does not only comprise of one firm providing you with a product. I specifically highlighted that that firm which is giving you the end product, for example this camera or this monitor, it is a customer of some other firm, and that firm is a customer of some other firm. And similarly, it comes into my hand from a vendor, and that vendor is actually someone else's customer. So there is a whole process, and this not only is forward process, but it also a reverse process, because whenever if I have an issue with this monitor, I would claim a warranty and I would send it back. If I claim that warranty, this product has to go back through that logistics process for repairs or for warranty claims. And then there is another that would again mean, in order to see future demand forecast, in order to perceive the future needs of customers, they need to have information, and that information flows back with it. Then if this product goes out of order and it is scrapped, there is a whole supply chain process to deal with that also. And then if that product is to be repaired and sold in a secondary market, there is a whole logistics process for that also. So you see, the information, the product goes forward, it can come back in reverse logistics, and the information goes in both directions. So it is a whole large size of a network which actually deals with the whole logistics management process. So it is not as simple as me going to a market and buying something, because that product which is there has exchanged many hands and has been through many processes, and then this availability becomes more complicated with the storage of that product. If that product itself is perishable, just like I gave you last time an example of Dawn bread, for example, or for example even you can see Allpur's milk or Nestle milk and all that, you would see that they have expiry dates on them. Now with expiry dates, it is necessary that that product is available at that moment. When that product does not expire, and I would only buy it whenever we go to buy such items, we look at the expiry dates. And if we have two similar products, one with an expiry date later than the others, we would always pick up the one which has a later expiry date. Same goes for example, Nestle yogurt or all those perishable products, or butter or milk and all those. So these consumable items are there at the time when I need it and at that exact moment. So it is the efficiency of that whole supply chain system, the whole logistics system, which ensures the delivery of that process, that product at that point when I need it, and at the price, because never ignore the aspect of the cost, because this whole process adds cost to for that delivery. So logistic costs are very significant costs, which we will discuss again later in maybe in this lecture or the next one. That logistic costs are very significant in terms of total cost incurred by a firm for the provision of that product to the customer, because that logistic cost is not only the delivery of that product but also the supply and scheduling cost of the raw material through which that product has been made. Now, in the screen you would see that how we define logistics. Logistics is that part of the supply chain process that plans, implements and control the efficient, effective flow and storage of goods, services and related information from the point of origin to the point of consumption for the purpose of conforming to customers' requirement. This is a definition of Council of Logistics Management. There are number of definitions from, for example, you would also see a military definition of logistics. Maybe some author would define it somehow in a different manner, but the point is that this definition encompasses a wide variety of information that is related to logistics management. Now, this Council of Logistics Management was Council of Logistics Management up till 2005. Now it is Council of Supply Chain Professionals. I already gave you a reference to in miscellaneous readings when I recommended certain text material for you to go through. I would recommend you to go through its website, because they host conferences, they conduct research, they generate ideas regarding efficiency of the supply chain process. Now, coming back to this definition, there are certain very important and very significant parts of this logistics management that are discussed in this definition. First of all, let's focus on the first one, which is product flows to be managed from raw material to the end where the product is being consumed. You see, we only, as I said earlier, because when I go to consume a product, I buy a Nestle milk pack and take it off the shelf. What comes into my mind is that that product was produced and delivered by delivery vans to that point. But that is not just what logistics management is, because logistics management goes further back from there. It would go back to the point where they would arrange the supplies of that milk to that production facility, and that production facility would process and package that milk and they would deliver it. Then there are other subcontractors also. They might also need packing and printing of that packaging material from someone else. They might have outsourced it, but even if they have installed their own factories for that, the issue is that that packaging material needs to be at that factory on the right time when it is required to be packaged, because that factory is their customer. So in every case, we need to highlight is that whenever the customer needs the product, at the place where the customer needs that product, and at the price the customer needs that product. All those things are required to be ensured. Now, if you see, this is the product as well as information flow. Not just the product, physical product, but also the information as well. Now, information flow from the point of origin where it starts from the scratch and to the point of sale where it is actually in the hands of the customer. So this involves production, this involves logistics, this involves marketing also, because the demand forecast is responsibility of marketing. Because if they put more things on shelves which are not required by the customer, the prices would go down. If you supply more than what is demanded, the prices would go down. This is simple supply and demand relationship. Now, in other case, there are perishable goods. If they get expired while they are on shelves, they are sent back to the company. That is another cost that they have to incur if they do not predict the exact amount that they need to supply to the shelves. So you see, it is the flow of product, goods or services. It is also the flow of information from the point of origin to the point of sale, and from the point of sale to the point of origin. The reverse logistics and the reverse flow of the information as well is also very important. If you, I wonder if you have seen the Nestle's advertisement in which they are actually highlighting the quality of the milk that they collect and they process. But in that advertisement, no doubt if they are highlighting, even if they are highlighting the quality, they show a glimpse of the supply chain process. A very interesting one, like big tankers collecting milk from various areas. Those tankers are moving to the factory, the supply of the raw material, right? The factory processes that milk. Somehow in that advertisement, they do not show the process of packaging, I mean the supply of packaging material over there. Because that is also, if they produce it themselves near the facility where the milk is being packed, then they would need raw material for that processing also. But obviously their focus of that advertisement is towards the quality of milk and not towards the supply chain process. But if you just look at it deeply, the way they process it and the way they pack it, that would mean that that processed milk, when it is to be poured in those boxes have to be there at the right time. Again, a supply chain issue. And then with the expiry dates on them, when they are delivered to the shelves, and when you see a customer, a happy customer, like drinking that glass of milk in their hands, holding that glass of milk in their hands and drinking from it, and he is healthy, that would mean that that product has been delivered at the time the customer needed it, and with the quality that customer needed it, and that quality also includes the expiry date aspect also. So product flows to be managed from the raw material to the point of consumption, and also product flows to be managed from raw material to the point of consumption in terms of information also. Sorry, I would call it information flows to be managed from raw material to point of consumption. And similarly, information flow from point of consumption back to the origin of the raw material. A very important aspect that has been highlighted in this definition. I would like you to go through this definition again. Logistics management is the part of supply chain process that plans, implements and controls the efficient and effective flow and storage of goods and services and related information from the point of origin to the point of consumption for the purpose of conforming to customers' requirements. Conforming to the customer's requirements mean the type of the product he needs, the quality, the price and the place are all the aspects that the customer that meets the customer's requirements. So supply chain process is also involved with marketing, it is also involved with production, it is also involved with logistics. Concerned with flow of services as well, we only usually consider that products, supply chain process is associated to products only. But then there are many service industries that are somehow associated to they have some sort of physical products as well, or they can provide those services which are dependent on the physical products. Let us consider McDonald's, for example. McDonald's has a physical product. They deliver a burger, for example, and Coke and that package. So they also need to manage their supply chain. For example, Marriott is giving a service, right? So that is exactly a service in which you live in a comfortable environment and everything is made available to you that is required. Now, but to ensure that whole process, to ensure that your room is clean, to ensure that the room is clean and tidy, to ensure that you are well served in each and every aspect, then that would mean that there is, at the back end, there is a whole supply chain process. They need those soaps in the washrooms, they need those bed sheets on the beds, they need those pillow covers and pillows and electric bulbs and lights and air conditioning, and all those things are there when they are needed. So that service is also necessary in terms of supply chain process. It can be, its quality can be ensured with the help of supply chain management or logistics management. Now going back again to another example, for example banks, they provide a service, right? Now, don't you think that they have also a logistics process as well? Delivery of cash to the wards, delivery of cash to State Bank, delivery of cash to the customer. and with all those needs and requirements that they have to conform to rules and regulations, and under the umbrella of the state bank with those stringent rules and regulations, when they have to operate, they need to have a strong logistics management process. And for example, if there are exchange of physical checks between two banks, I can go deposit an Allied Bank check in Bank Al-Flah or Habib Bank Limited, for example. So if I deposit that check, then by the end of that transaction is completed, even if it is completed online, I get the money if the check is honored. But the point is that that check of Allied Bank has to go to Allied Bank at one point or other. So if that check has to be delivered to that point, there is a supply chain process behind that. And I'm just like highlighting on the major things. Then there is requirements of stationery and air conditioning and a perfect environment for the customer to walk into. So all those things and all those facilities need supply chain and logistics management. Now then another important aspect is that logistics, which is highlighted in this definition by Councils of Logistics Management, is that logistics is a process. Logistics is part of supply chain process. They are viewing as supply chain as under a broader umbrella. We will discuss this later on, because normally in this text we would use, what I would say is, I would use logistics and supply chain management synonymously. That would mean that I would use these words for each other. I won't differentiate between them, because there have been many debates whether logistics is a part of supply chain or logistics is just another name of the supply chain process. But in this specific definition, in this text, in these lectures, we would use logistics and supply chain synonymously. But that does not mean that we would not come to that debate that whether logistics is a part of supply chain or it is just another name for it. But as per this definition of Council of Logistics Management, supply chain logistics is a part of supply chain. So that would mean supply chain has many other aspects as well, which we would discuss when we move forward. So this is the aspect that is mentioned at the last, that now another important aspect, that they call it a process. As we discussed in the last lecture, we can look at all those activities individually. We can look at supply of raw material from our supplier individually. We can see the production process individually. We can monitor the, you can say, marketing activities and information flows individually. We can look at, for example, production and delivery of product to warehouse individually. We can manage all those activities at individual point of origin. But then there is coordinated process. This is how the new version or new vision of supply chain or logistics management, to look at it as a coordinated process, not as an individual process. So that is why it is a process, not a separate closed activity. We would again further discuss this as well. And then the last aspect, which I've already discussed, that it is a part, not the complete supply chain. This is what is emphasized by this definition. So I hope you understand the main important things that I have in this definition. It covers a whole network. It covers a whole network of activities, starting from the raw material to the finished product, to the point of delivery to the customer, the point of consumption. Now, between these, it can be a good, it can be a service. The information need to go from, it is not just the delivery of the product, but it is also the delivery of the information as well. And in my view, it is the information moving forward as well as information moving backward. Plus, in case of a product, specifically in a service, it is, for example, there is reverse logistics also, because the big organizations always have established complaint and service centers at various locations. You can complain about, you just can call a hotline and complain about a certain product. So this whole logistics process is what we have extracted from it is process that plans, implements and controls It is not just responsibility. You cannot look at it at a single individually managed activity. You have to look at it as a coordinated activity, because it plans, implements and controls what? Plans, implements, controls the storage of goods and services, the flow of goods and services, and the related information to one point to the other point, from one point to the other point. This is a very broad aspect of logistics management, and you must realize that is why Peter Drucker called it a whole, you can say, business, the complete business process as a whole. Then there is supply chain management. It is how supply chain management is actually the link between marketing, logistics and production. Because if you look at it, when we talk about the flow of information, when we talk about the flow of goods and services, when we talk about the reverse flow, reverse logistics, you must realize that marketing is responsible for telling the customer that this is how your need of a certain good or a service can be satisfied. It is responsible for placing that good in the customer's hand. It is responsible for defining the price, or for example the type of the product, the quality of the product, and all those aspects when you come in direct contact with the customer, right? At the back end there is production. Now that production actually is what is producing that product, right? Product has a face. Now that face is defined based on the customer needs. If I do not want, if people do not want, for example, Coca-Cola to taste that way, why would it be produced? So who would tell us that this is the taste and this is the type of bottle and this is the quantity that customers need? This is the packaging units that they would require. For these packaging units to be defined, marketing comes in. But then to actually realize those packaging units, to realize that type of a taste, production comes in. Between the customer and from the customer to production, in between is the process of logistics, right? What type of product is being produced, how it is to be handled, how it is to be stored, how much it is to be stored, how it is to be delivered, and at the back end of the production, to ensure that product, who are the suppliers, how would they supply it, what quantity is required to be supplied, what quality is required to be supplied, all those aspects. So it is very difficult to look at those relationships, because if you treat them as separate entities, as marketing division, logistics division and production division, it is a fact that when divisional politics comes into play, divisional politics might come into play with these separate business units. Now that is another important aspect. But if you look at them at a coordinated activity, some people would say that for a business, marketing is of prime importance. Some people would say that marketing and production would be of prime importance, and finance and HR and all the other stuff and including the logistics are secondary support activities. But all those activities need to be coordinated under one umbrella, and that umbrella is defined by supply chain management from the production. And then another important aspect of supply chain that cannot be ignored is that relationship with your suppliers, relationship with your customers, going one step beyond the boundaries. You see, I'm talking about not vertical integration, or I'm not talking about horizontal integration. I'm not talking about acquiring your suppliers. I'm not talking about acquiring your distributors. You are in between. Let's assume that there is a business entity that is in between. It has its own suppliers of the raw material. It has its own people who they deliver the product to, who distribute the product further to customers, for example, at the shop front. Now, then that would mean that you have to establish relationships with them also. So supply chain management turns out to be based on the relationships with these two separate business entities, because they are separate legal entities. Now we in the start when we talk about interaction between marketing, logistics and production, that is in various departments of a single firm. But when considering the whole supply chain process, we need to talk about the suppliers, we need to talk about the distributors, we need to talk about the suppliers of the suppliers, we need to talk about the customers of the customers. So the umbrella becomes bigger and bigger. And since that umbrella becomes bigger and bigger, and since those other suppliers and those other suppliers of suppliers and your customers of your customers might be separate business entities, separate business legal entities, so your influence over them reduces, right? But still you are dependent on them on both ends. When you're dependent on them, you have to manage those relationships. So that is why, because you can manage marketing, logistics and production as a CEO of a single firm. You can handle marketing, logistics and for example production at your own, because those are your own departments. But then when it comes out to the other business entities, those are separate legal firms. So you have to manage the relationships with them. So that is why there is importance of supply chain relationships, because there are interactions that take place with legally separated firms. Now, based on this paradigm that I have just laid down, look at this definition of supply chain management by Handfield and Nicholas. Supply chain management is the integration of all the activities associated with the flow and transformation of goods from raw material through to end user, right? Flow of goods and information, all the activities associated. The important aspect is all the activities associated, from the raw material to the end point of the customer, as well as information flows from this end to that end and from that end to this end, through improved supply chain relationships to achieve a sustainable competitive edge. Another two aspects of this definition are very important. One is the one that I've already highlighted, because you are coming in interaction with not just your 2-3 departments, you are going to interact with separate legal business entities. So in order to deal with those separate legal business entities, you have to manage those relationships, supply chain relationships. If you have to manage those legal supply chain relationships, that is the whole supply chain process. And all of that exercise, all of those efforts, as we have again discussed that statement that to talk about supply chain is to talk about the whole business process. And all of that is to achieve a sustainable competitive edge against everybody else. Because if, for example, as I said earlier, if I as a company, as a firm, cannot deliver a product at the shelf for my customer when he needs it, at the place he needs it, and at the cost and price he needs it, then I would fail. We would discuss case studies or historical events based on this aspect that I'm highlighting right now as well. But let me explain it very simply. I would fail if I cannot deliver the product when my customer needs it and where he needs it and at the price he needs it. And in order to ensure that I do not fail, I have to ensure that I manage all the relationships, I manage all the activities associated with the delivery of the product and with the availability of raw material to make that product, and as well as the information flows in from both directions. I would need to ensure all of them for improved supply chain relationships and to gain a competitive edge over everybody else, so that when my customers goes over there and wants to buy that product at that place, that product is available over there at the price that he is willing to pay. So this is the broader definition, or this is the definition of supply chain management. Now, what is the difference between supply chain management and logistics management? Coming to that debate, we have seen the definitions of supply chain and logistics management. Logistics, some people would argue that logistics management is a part of supply chain management. From the first definition that we saw, definition by you can say Council of Logistics Management, that logistics is a part of the process of supply chain processes, all that. So supply chain is under the broader umbrella, and logistics management is a part of that, or logistics process is a part of that whole supply chain process. Then one aspect is that. Then another aspect is that supply chain is another name for integrated business logistics. Integrated business logistics would mean that all the business entities, if we look at them in an integrated way in terms of logistics management, that is simply supply chain management. So this is basically the difference, you can say, the controversy that exists between supply chain and logistics professionals. That some would argue that it is part, and some would argue that they are merely the same name of it. But let's look at this aspect. Actually, the aim of these two aspects are exactly the same. It is written down over here. Getting the right goods or services to the right place and the right time in the desired condition at the lowest cost and highest return on investment. The whole logistics management exercise is focusing on this. We saw it from the definition as well. The whole supply chain exercise is exactly going through this. We saw it from the definition as well. So you see, that is the reason why I would use logistics management and supply chain management synonymously. Because the aim of both of these exercises is exactly the same. Even if we debate about the definitions, both of them are going through the same activities, almost the similar activities and almost similar processes and similar efforts to ensure that the product is available, the product that is required. Product means good or a service that is required is available at the right place where it is needed, at the right time when it is needed, and at the lowest possible cost. Right? To lowest possible cost and in the desired condition, so that the whole investment is profitable. Because the purpose of any business entity is profit, is return on its investment. And if the customer is not satisfied with the quality or condition or the environment or the place or the time of that product, or even if the customer is not satisfied, then whole exercise is useless. And if the business entity which is providing that product is not satisfied with the return on its investment, then whole exercise is useless. So the logistics and the mission of logistics and supply chain is actually the same. So this would be the reason why we would use, in this text and in this textbook as well, and in these lectures as well, we would use the logistics and supply chain terms synonymously, because in both of these, the sole purpose, the mission is the same, number one, and the activities that we would be focusing on are also part of logistics and also part of supply chain as well, because the aim is actually the same for both of them. We would be talking about inventory management, we would be talking about the product and its packaging and its handling and its storage and the storage and handling decisions, and we would be talking about the whole network. We would be talking about you can say the cost aspects. In fact, under both of these areas we would be talking about the same thing. So it would be we won't be differentiating between these two terminologies. When I say supply chain management, I would say I would be meaning logistics management, and then when I would say logistics management, I would automatically be meaning supply chain management. And another important aspect, that most of the things that we would be discussing in this lecture might be from the perspective of manufacturing itself. I would try to bring an example from service industries wherever I can remember that I have to also incorporate that. But the point is that most of the discussion that is related to physical product distribution and handling and its supplies, those are applicable to service industry also. 70% around 70%, in fact, in developing countries, in developed countries, the service industries are booming more than before. Manufacturing has been shifted to developing countries across the globe. This is one aspect of globalization, because when firms look for low cost, because when we talk about low cost, firms locate in regions, in the aspect of globalization, firms would locate, for example, in China, right, or in India, because the labor cost is very cheap over there, because the raw material cost is very cheap over there. So why produce in Europe, for example, with very expensive labor and export it to Asia at a higher cost, and why not produce the same thing in China or India and then export it to Asia at a lower cost? This is one aspect of global village. So with that whole aspect, as shown in this slide also, desired condition at the lowest cost and highest return on investment. Now that aspect is actually summarized by that location theory as well, by the choice of the location strategy as well. And that location strategy is discussed under logistics management as well as supply chain management. So as you see, since the mission is same, since the discussion revolves around in the text almost on the same grounds for both of these areas or managerial aspects, so we would use them synonymously across the board. So now let's turn to a very interesting schematic diagram showing the whole supply chain in a global environment. Now I hope you can, this is very visible to you. I tried my level best. In order to see what is supply chain, we need to understand that supply chain has developed over time, has become more important over time, as I have discussed many times in my last lecture and this lecture, with globalization. And in the global environment, the responsibility on the shoulders of supply chain professionals have increased manifold. It is not just the globalization from the aspect of trade, that I produce something, I export that. Even production facilities are being relocated to different places, as I just talked about China and India. And it's not just that as well. Another important aspect is that things are being produced at different locations for the same firm, and then they are ensured, their availability is ensured at one single place to make out one single product. Another important aspect, you see. One single product, for example, one car of Toyota or one Ford car is being, maybe, for example, Suzuki company, let's talk about Pakistan. There is a Suzuki plant in Pakistan, right? They are assembling various parts over here. They are just assembling, they are not manufacturing as such. Now, some parts of that whole Suzuki car that comes out in the end are being manufactured and supplied from our local vendors in Pakistan. But many of them, or in fact I would say most of them, are coming from China or Korea or Taiwan or different places. So one single product to be turned into a finished good, it requires its various intermediate goods from various locations. So you see, the supply chain has received more responsibility with the globalization aspect, because every single part of one single product is being manufactured as an individual product at the lowest cost possible, at the best possible location. It has its own supply chain process, I could say. So every single product is surrounded by its own supply chain relationship, logistics relationship, and those logistic relationships overlap with each other. One single camera or one single monitor has been made out of small parts that have been manufactured at various locations and brought at one single place to be assembled. And each part has been decided to be located at that specific location because its production, for example, one single IC or one single wire might be from Taiwan and one of them might be from China, because they can be produced technologically as well as in terms of cost effectiveness, cost efficiency in that single location. It was expensive to produce by themselves, so that is why it was produced over there and assembled over here to give the final product a shape. So globalization has even complicated things much more and requires much more higher level of efficiency from logistics and supply chain management. So the global environment, if we come below, one cell below the global environment, inter-corporate coordination, functional shifting, third-party providers, relationship management, and supply chain structures. All these discussed and managed under one umbrella. This is, we would go into functional areas also, but let's look at above at inter-organizational, inter-corporate coordination between two different legal separate business entities. Because one firm is providing a good to another firm, but it is also a customer of some other firm. And that other firm is a supplier of this firm, but it is a customer of some other firm. Every firm is a customer of other firm, and every firm is a supplier of some other firm, or an individual or an entity. And then there is an end in the firm that we see like Sony or Dell or Toshiba or Coca-Cola or Nestle who provide us the product in the end when we buy it from the shelf. And even in that case, we buy it from the shelf. We do not go and buy from the factory. That would mean that that vendor who is selling that product is a customer of somebody in between. There is somebody in between who's the supplier, and it is the customer of that firm. There might be so many separate agents in the whole supply chain process. So that would mean there is functional shifting. There are many third-party providers who are actually other business entities as well. Then because of that, there is relationships management. The relationships we were talking about before in the definition of the supply chain management. In order for that product to be over there on time for the customer in that specific environment, at that specific place, for that specific price, to ensure that all those relationships have to be managed, right, to be ensured, to be strengthened. And then in a very broader aspect, I would say that, for example, if Dell computers is being supplied these screens of the monitors that they make or the laptops that they make by somebody else, and that somebody else is getting raw material from somebody else, and that somebody else is getting some other material from somebody else, there are few business entities. So the broader aspect of supply chain would be that I would manage this whole activity and ensure that it is well coordinated for that screen to be with me when I need to assemble it exactly on the moment that I need to do it. Or maybe, like, obviously there is packaging and storage and warehousing also in all that process, and I'm just making it simpler to ignore those things. So the point is that all those relationships need to be managed somehow, right? And then supply chain structures, because there are different structures. There is warehousing, there is the supply chain structure depends on the inventory management system that each organization is following. The supply chain structures depends on the product type, whether it can be transported in what type of an environment. The supply chain structure also depends on the location as well. There are so many things that it depends on. But the main aspect is that in the global environment, inter-corporate coordination is under the umbrella of supply chain. Then there is interfunctional coordination. Interfunctional coordination, how? Marketing is related to sales. In fact, all these are related to each other. Marketing is in direct contact with the customer. They develop the need, they develop the knowledge in the customer that this is the product that would satisfy your need. This is rather how I would say it. And marketing is for forecasting as well as sales. They together they would forecast the demand. They would ensure the timely delivery of that product. How can they ensure? They need to see the logistics process, that what time it would take to deliver that specific product to that point, and then they also need to ensure the production process. The production process also needs to ensure that raw material is provided on time, and for that they have to manage the relationship with the outside environment. It is so intermingled with each other that they cannot be left alone. Nothing can be, they cannot simply be managed, each one of them as a single individual activity, letting everything go. Because if the marketing team or the sales team needs that product on one specific date, then you need to know the whole process involved to ensure that that product is there on that specific date and time. Because the place is important, the time is important, the environment is important, and the price is also important. And all of this exercise in terms of low cost method. Then there is marketing, sales, there is R&D also. What type of product is required? Do customers need a change in the product? You would definitely see even changes in normal consumption items. It also actually changes with the trends in the society. When we estimate a demand function, we also consider the trend aspect. Sweaters, for example, or pullovers or jackets are not required in summer season, or not required in the countries where there are summers. Then with the global environment and changes, certain type of the fashion, for example, for t-shirts or for even suiting, men's suiting has changed over time. There were like double breast coats, then there were very different aspects, and trends have changed. A customer would not go and buy a thing of an old fashioned way from if he's going to buy now. He would always need a newer thing. How does he find out that this is what I need? Because now, since the world has turned into a global village, any fashion that comes up in, for example, for this region of USA or any Western civilization or society, it would spread across the globe. If that fashion trend through media and through social media and through electronic media, through print media can spread that fast, so does the customer's needs and trends also change with it. Then the trends would also mean that, for example, there were times when there was no worry about cholesterol. People would buy vegetable ghee or banaspati ghee at any type of it. But with coming with awareness about cholesterol levels, health issues, the trends have changed. Now the marketing team has to market low cholesterol milk. Now the production facility has to produce low cholesterol, for example, cooking oil, not milk, sorry. Low fat milk, but low cholesterol cooking oils. Now with that low cholesterol cooking oil, you need to do R&D for that. Because marketing and sales will let you know that the customers are demanding this now. This is how trends are changing. So for that you have to do R&D. For that you have to revamp the production facility. People are cautious about calcium, people are cautious about cholesterol, people are cautious about fluoride in the toothpaste, people are the changing trends are, for example, in dressing, for jeans and t-shirts, rather than, for example, there used to be very simplistic sort of dressings in our villages in early time periods, but now everybody needs jeans and t-shirts, right? And joggers and stuff like that. And then people are well aware of the latest trends in USA. They see models and actors and celebrities, and they want to be like them. And certainly then another aspect is that in Pakistan very recently we have started to see cars like big station wagons. Station wagons are those hunched backs which have like bigger area. They are for bigger families. Now those station wagons were not very common in Pakistan before that. Like, for example, Toyota Fielder or Honda Airwave, they were not very common. but now they are becoming common. That is a change in trend, right? So the whole supply chain process needs to be revamped. R&D was done for these things. Marketing and sales informed. There was forecasting how much quantity is needed, the production and scheduling process, the purchasing of the raw material for that, the logistics process, the information systems, flow of information, the finance mechanism, how to finance all those activities, and then the customer services in the end. That if something goes wrong, if we are supplying that product to Pakistan, and we need to have customer services over there. You see, so this is a very big process which is in coordination with all these activities. These are, I'm talking about interfunctional coordinations, and interfunctional coordinations between different functions of a same business entity depends on trust, commitment, risk, dependence, and behaviors of different functional entities. So all of this together to ensure the whole supply chain process. First we were talking about the inter-corporate, in the global environment, the inter-corporate coordination. Now we are talking about within that corporation, various functional areas need to coordinate with each other. For, again, I repeat that statement, for that product to be at the location, on the time, at the price at which a customer is willing to pay or buy that product when he needs it, on the time and in the environment that he needs it. So this whole exercise needs to be done to ensure that. So forecasting is necessary because you cannot overburden a shelf in the shop, with expiry dates also playing a very important role based on the type of the product, and with mobile phones, with so much changing technologically, you cannot put an old phone in such a lump in the market, in such a huge quantity in the market, that when the technology changes, all of those are coming back to you, right? So same goes for the production also. You have to produce as soon as it is required, as much as it is required, and as early as possible, so that it is in the hand of customers to gain the competitive edge. Because if your competitor provides that product before you, definitely the customer would switch to that product. If I go to a market and I cannot find milk pack, I would buy all-purpose. If I cannot find all-purpose, I would buy milk pack. I would substitute. And logistics, again, for all of this, from marketing, sales, to forecasting, to production, and to purchasing, logistics is also a very important aspect. Purchasing in terms of all the raw materials and supplies, and to ensure the delivery of those raw materials and supplies, there is need to be coordination with logistics. And then marketing needs and sales needs the products to be at that location on that time at that price, and they need to be in coordination with logistics and production and everybody else. And same goes for information systems, because with development in technologies, it is necessary that those, rather than there should be an efficient system of communication between all these departments. If the system is not that efficient, that would again mean stockpiling, shortage in inventory or excess in inventory, and in terms of, for example, product not being delivered on time and at the right price. So that would simply mean that information systems need to be stronger as well. And then turning again, the finance also has its role to play in terms of providing all the financial requirements of all these departments, and to stay in touch with all these departments. And then in the end, the most important is the customer services, and one of the most important departments is customer services, because that department is the one which gives the reverse flow of information. I was talking about reverse logistics earlier. Reverse logistics is the flow of information backwards, as well as the products that are obsolete, or the products that have manufacturing faults. So customer service is also important, and customer services is the one that has to in the end deal with the customer after sales and marketing. So they have to be at the point where they are needed. If for example you have all of you must use mobile phones, right? So when you use mobile phones, what happens if the signals drop for some time? What happens if there are certain charges deducted out of the way from your total balance? You would immediately call customer services, right? So they have to be there to receive that call. They have to be on that exact point in time when the customer needs them. They have to solve your problem. So this whole process is also in coordination with customer services. Then going to the last line, you can see that there is the focal firm which we are talking about is in the center. Then there is its supplier and the supplier's supplier. And on the other side there is customer and there is customer's customers. I was discussing this aspect also before a few minutes ago, that it is very important for you to coordinate with all of them. To this whole activity, for the product to be on the shelf, on the time and at the place, it is necessary that this whole supply chain relationship is well managed. And then the supply chain flows on the right side. You would see there is products going in both direction, there are services, there is information, there are financial resources, there is demand that is coming from marketing to the production and logistics side, and then there are forecasts that they estimate about the customers for the future. So you see, this supply chain flow is all dependent on these coordination among inter-organization coordination, inter-corporate coordination, and then coordination of the departments among themselves, the functional areas among themselves. And in the end, the net result of all this supply chain process is customer satisfaction, customer value, profitability for the organization, and out of this, most important of all, the competitive edge over your competitors. Because all of this exercise, you need to satisfy your customers for that competitive edge. You need to provide customer value for that competitive edge. You need to be profitable for that competitive edge, and for all of these to be achieved, it is necessary that the supply chain process is well coordinated activity where relationships are managed, where your suppliers and suppliers and your customers and customers, everybody is working in line with each other, along with your departments working in line with themselves. I guess we are out of time right now, so I guess I would summarize what we have covered so far. We have basically covered the logistics, the definition of logistics management and the definitions of supply chain management, and after expressing those definitions, I've highlighted that in this course we would be using both terms synonymously. And why is that? Because we would be focusing on the main mission of these two. And the main mission of these two is to provide the customer with the product at the place where they need it, on the time when they need it, in the environment in which they need it, at the lowest possible price, and at the highest possible return on investment. This is the aim of the whole supply chain process. And with that aim, we came to this schematic diagram, which covers all the aspects of relationships of the organization with other organization, of the relationships among the departments, and all those relationships are well managed, because we saw in the definition that supply chain management is also about the relationships that are being managed among the organization and among the departments, and only if those relationships are well managed, only in that sense it can be ensured that the customer is satisfied, they receive the products, they receive the services, they give the feedback, that feedback goes back, these entities can forecast the future demands, the financial resources are available well in time. Only in that case the customer can be satisfied, and with that competitive edge can be achieved. Okay, thank you very much for bearing with me through the second lecture, and hope to see you soon. Take care. Allah Hafiz.